Hello, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be continuing exactly where we left off and continue talking about from the end of the space race till now. So we'll be going over things from Voyager all the way up to the most recent launch that is notable. So without further ado, let's just get started. The first rocket that I want to talk about is the Titan 3E, and it launched the Voyager 1 all the way to interstellar space. This was done on the 20th of August, 1971. This rocket had a couple of interesting ideas that were built into it. For the first thing, it had two boosters, which were the model of UA-120s, and they produced 5.3 meganewtons each. They used a new type of solid propellant that wasn't very common at the time. This is polybutadiene acrylonitrate, and this is used commonly throughout this episode. The first stage is, so these are the boosters, right? These will drop off. The first stage is two LR87s, each producing 1.5 meganewtons. These run a gas generator cycle of dinitrogen tetroxide and aerosine 50, which if you want to recap on what aerosine 50 is, just watch my other video. We went over it because it was a very common fuel mixture used in space race rockets. The second stage, which is around right here, probably here, is the LR9111, and it produced 449 kilonewtons of thrust, and it was a expander hydrolox engine. And what an expansion engine is if you have, so for example, if we draw two fuel tanks, and here's our nozzle. Okay. So essentially what an expander design is, well, we know that cold things, when they expand, they take up more volume and thus will produce at higher pressures, right? This is why, those electronic dust cleaners, those spray cans, they're really cold to the touch, and when you let them out, they expand, turn into a gas. Same thing here, except the difference is we're going to be running either a fuel or oxidizer through the engine nozzle, which is a technique that is commonly used to keep engine nozzles cooled. It's called regenerative cooling, and a lot of different engines use this. We're going to be using this to both keep the engine cool and also turn our propellants from a low pressure liquid into a high pressure gas. And what do we do with high pressure gas? We use it to spin turbines. And again, we're using this high pressure gas to spin the turbine, and we're going to add it back into the combustion chamber, and there we go. Now you have combustions flowing into a chamber nice and quick, and you can get stable combustion happening. Third stage is RL10A3, and it's a hydrolox, 66 kilonewtons. Oh, sorry, I just realized I made a mistake. The second stage is not an expander cycle. It is also a N2 aerosine gas generator cycle. It's the third stage that is an expander cycle using hydrolox. Sorry, they should be like this. Sorry about that. And one of the more unique parts about this rocket is it's one of the first rockets to use a kick stage. And essentially what a kick stage is if you think about an orbit around a planet, right? So what Voyager 1 did is it took advantage of a nicely timed part into the solar system where all the planets were nicely aligned. And this allowed it to kind of use other planets as slingshot effects, so it was able to sling itself out of the solar system. So what the fourth stage really was is, say your orbit was highly elliptical, you could use a kick stage here. This would increase your velocity, and your highly elliptical orbit could just be turned into a escape trajectory of the planet you're orbiting, or could help you get into a maneuver for the next maneuver. Obviously, it uses a carboxyl terminated polybutadiene engine, which means it is a solid rocket motor, so you only get one shot of it, and again, you can't turn it off, so you have to be quite precise when using it. And the one they used produced 68 kilonewtons of thrust. Just get rid of this. Next rocket, or next mission I want to talk about is the IRAS, launched on the 25th of January, 1983. It is the first infrared observatory launch. By this I mean it's the first infrared observatory in space, and it was launched on a Delta 3910. As you can see, the Delta rocket might remind you of some Soviet rockets, and this is probably because of the massive amounts of side boosters. However, unlike Soviet rockets, these side boosters were not liquid-powered engines. These are the Castor 4 engines, and there's 9 of them surrounding this one central fuselage. They use hydroxyl-terminated polybutadiene, and they produce each 355 kilonewtons of thrust. So with 9 of them, it's around like 2.7 meganewtons. The first stage is a RS-27, which is using a gas generator design using Keralox, and it produces around 971 kilonewtons of thrust at sea level. The second stage is a TR-201. This uses a dinitrogen tetroxide aerosine 50 mixture again. It is a pressure-fed engine. So if you remember what a pressure-fed engine is, it's basically you have 2 propellants stored at high pressures, and you have a combustion chamber. These 2 propellants at high pressures want to leave their tanks. The only place is the combustion chamber, and because it uses the dinitrogen tetroxide and aerosine mixture, when the 2 combustions come in contact with each other, they will combust and thus produce thrust. The next rocket I want to talk about is the Gyoto mission. It was launched on the 2nd of July, 1985. So between here and here, there's a little bit of a jump. Between here and here, there's a little bit of a jump. You know, I'm just choosing the most significant and also new rockets that we haven't covered before, because there was a lot of launches of things like the space shuttle, but I've already covered the space shuttle in the series, so I'm trying to stray away from space shuttle missions. This is the first close observation of Halley's Comet, and it was launched on Ariane 1. The Ariane 1 stood at 50 meters tall and had no boosters, but it had 3 stages. On the first stage, there was 4 Viking 5 engines. They run a gas generator combustion cycle with dinitrogen tetroxide and a UH25, which is a mixture of 25% hydrazine hydrate and 25% unsymmetrical dimethylhydrazine. Each of them produced 6.678 kilonewtons of thrust at sea level. Second stage uses a Viking 4 engine. It produces 713 kilonewtons in vacuum, also using the same propellants as the engine before it, And the third the third stage is also a gas generator engine. The HMA-7 produced 61.6 kilonewtons of thrust, and it run a Hydrolox engine. I guess, yeah, let's just get on to the next thing. I was going to say something else, but I just forgot, sorry. The next one I want to talk about is the Cassini-Huygens, and it was launched on the 15th of October, 1997. It is the first craft to orbit Saturn, and it also soft landed on Titans. There's 2 parts of this craft. Cassini first orbit Saturn, Huygens first soft landing on Titan, and ironically launched by Titan 4. Titan 4 was 62 meters tall. You can see the similarities between the Titan 4 and the Titan 3E. They're very similar rockets because, the Titan 3 is a predecessor of the Titan 4. The components of this is it uses 2 boosters, 1, 2. These are the Hercules model, and they used, hydroxyl terminated polybutadiene, and they produce 7.5 meganewtons of thrust at sea level. These are disposable boosters as usual. The The first stage is a LR-72, and it uses a gas generated cycle with dinitrogen tetroxide and aerosine 50, and it produces 2.4 meganewtons of thrust. The second stage is using the same propellant, and it is a gas generator that produces 467 kilonewtons of thrust. That would be around here. This over here is an interstage for the rocket, so this part, you would get this part completely drops off. Second stage will be here. And the third stage, which is inside of this fairing, these are fairings by the way, this is a fairing, this is a fairing, this is a fairing, this is a fairing. They're all fairings, and what a fairing is essentially, you can think of it as a nose cone, but the difference between a fairing and a nose cone is that a nose cone doesn't come off, and a fairing kind of, say this marker is my cargo that I want to put in space, and my hands are the fairing. The nose cone would just be like this. A fairing will go up and then explode outwards so that the cargo isn't put under any aerodynamic stress. And basically all the rockets have been and will be using them right now. The third stage is a hydrolox engine. It uses two RL-10s, each producing 147 kilonewtons of thrust, running a gas generator cycle. The next rocket is the next mission is the Expedition 1, which was launched on the 31st of October 2000. So we're finally hitting the 2000s, and turning this page, we'll see a lot more new age rockets. This is the first long stay on the ISS, and was launched by a Soyuz U. This rocket is probably very reminiscent of the Soviet designs that we saw last time that we were doing this, and it stands at 51.1 meters tall. And as you can see, if you remember some of the Soviet engines, this engine should look very familiar. So will this engine probably not. So the boosters, it uses 4 RD-117s gas generator engines, each of them producing around 38.5 kilonewtons. It's kind of a range because those boosters stay on for quite a while actually. The first stage is a gas generator engine, the RD-118, and it produces 925.9 kilonewtons of thrust. And that would be around here. The second stage will be basically here-ish, and it is a RD-0110, and it produces 297.9 kilonewtons of thrust using Kellogg's gas generator cycle. Real quick, before we turn the page, I'm going to go over why each of these rockets is on here, why I chose all of them. Voyager 1 is pretty obvious. It's a pretty big first craft to ever reach interstellar space. It also has a golden record on board, which is a record of a lot of notable human accomplishments on board, our music, that type of stuff. IRAS, because I'm a huge fan of the James Webb, and this is its long ago predecessor, I guess you could call it. It's also an infrared observatory. Kyoto, because Halley's Comet is something that has interested humanity for a very long time, actually. And this is our first mission where we ever got a close-up examination of Halley's Comet. Cassini and Huygens. Cassini is probably one of the most, in my opinion, one of the coolest space probes that we've ever sent out. And Huygens was a joy to learn about during researching for this. Saturn is also my favorite planet, and of course I'm going to be biased and I'm going to include a mission to Saturn. Expedition 1, it's the first notable long stay on the ISS, and the ISS is probably one of humanity's greatest accomplishments as a species. So I chose this. The reason I didn't choose the ISS is because a lot of the parts were launched up using the space shuttle, or a lot of Soviet craft that we've already talked about. Oh, wrong way. Sorry, text would be backwards if I went that way. Alright, getting to large time skip here. Last craft we ended was 2000. This craft is 2015. So, next mission I want to talk about is the New Shepard 2. This is the second mission of the New Shepard, and it was launched on the 23rd of November in 2015. This is the first craft to propulsively land itself after a suborbital flight. And it was obviously launched in a New Shepard. The New Shepard stands at 18 meters tall and only has one stage. This stage uses a BE3 combustion engine using a tap-off cycle, and it uses hydrolox, which is hydrogen liquid oxygen, and produces 490 kilonewtons of thrust. Now, what a cap-off or tap-off combustion cycle looks like is you have their fuel. If you fuel an oxidizer, your fuel and oxidizer at first will come through here using an engine start, which we'll talk about in much greater detail in another video. They will combust in here, but we're going to take some of the combustion products and put it into here and drive a turbine with it. This turbine will then we'll use this high horsepower turbine to drive the rest of the fluids through into the combustion chamber. And using this, they were able to launch an object into suborbital trajectory and also land this rocket straight down. Sorry about that. The next notable mission is the Falcon 9, which was just like a month later, and this is the Falcon 9 landing tests. On the 21st of December 2015, they got their first orbital rocket propulsively landed. SpaceX has a really good video about this, and it's really funny on their YouTube channel. It's called How Not to Land an Orbital Class Booster. The Falcon 9 stands at a 70 meters tall, much taller than a New Shepard, but it also has larger capabilities. These here are landing legs, right here, and they fold out. So if this is the bottom of the rocket, they fold out in a familiar 4-cross form, and allow the rocket to actually touch the ground. The New Shepard also has landing legs. They are more like the lunar lander's landing legs and kind of go like this, and when the thing lands, it'll be like that. They both have the similar landing legs to a lot of other things that have landed. This one's closer to the lunar lander, and this is a more unique design. The first stage of Saturn V uses 9 Merlin 1D engines. These are gas generator Carolox engines running at 844.4 kilonewtons each. So there's a lot of thrust behind this thing. But it makes sense because you need a lot of thrust to get up, and you also need thrust to land because you're coming from orbital, not from suborbital. There's a very large difference between the speeds that we're talking between here. The second stage, which isn't recovered, is a Merlin 1D vacuum engine, and it runs at 934 kilonewtons of thrust and is a gas generator cycle. The difference in speeds between suborbital and orbital is pretty immense because suborbital means that you have a trajectory. If this is the Earth, suborbital is this, orbital is that, right? The difference in speeds between achieving these things is immense. I think the Earth's orbital speed is like 10 kilometers a second, which is pretty absurd. Suborbital obviously is not easy, but it's a lot easier to get a suborbital flight than it is an orbital flight. Both of these are impressive feats, however. The next rocket is one of my favorite rockets, actually. It is the Electron rocket. And the mission I'm talking about is the Capstone rocket, or the Capstone mission. It was launched on the 28th of June, 2022. It's the first electric rocket to the moon, and it stands at a nice old 18 meters tall. The first stage is 19 Rutherford engines. These engines are unique because they are the first electric engines to be used on an orbital class rocket. In the space race, anything like this wouldn't have been even close to be possible because you need lithium-ion batteries for this type of tech. There's no batteries with close to this much power density. That's why they won the Nobel Prize. Each of them produced a nice 25 kilonewtons of thrust, and they were running Carolox. The second stage is one Rutherford vacuum optimized engine, and it is 25.8 kilonewtons of thrust, running Carolox as well. And this rocket also uses a kick stage, using what it calls the photon. You know, you have the electron plus the photon, right? It uses one Curie engine that produces 0.12 kilonewtons of thrust, which is a monoprop engine. However, the propellant that they use is kind of unknown. It's a trade secret. One of the more exciting launches. Oh, I just realized these two dates are not in order. Ooh. No, one of the more exciting launches, I'm just going to ignore that, is the James Webb Space Telescope launch, or VA 256, and it was launched on the 25th of December, 2021, and it is currently the most powerful space telescope. It was launched on an Orion 5, which stands at a 52 meters tall, and it has pretty big. It's very powerful. It's what's called a super heavy booster, or a super heavy lifter, and it has two boosters. Each produce 7 meganewtons of thrust, and they are using a mixture of ammonium perchlorate, aluminum, and hydroxyl terminated polybutadiene. It has a one core stage, as do all rockets. It has a core stage that runs with a 1 Vulcan 2 engine. The Vulcan is a 960 kilonewton thrust engine, and that works a hydrolox with a gas generator cycle. The second stage is a HM78. It runs a hydrolox gas generator cycle and produces 67 kilonewtons of thrust. This is the rocket that took the James Webb Space Telescope out of Earth's orbit and into L2. Now we've got Artemis 1. This is a launch that I'm sure many of you have heard of, and it was launched on the 16th of November 2022, and it is the first test of the Orion capsule, and hopefully the first of a very long line of missions for Artemis. It stands at a nice old 111 meters tall, by far the tallest rocket that is on this episode, and it is also the most powerful. It has two boosters, and these each produce 7.2 meganewtons of thrust. They use P-band and APCP. P-band is basically just polybutadiene acrylonitrate, as was on the first rocket here on the other page. I can show it real quick after we finish. And APCP, which is ammonium perchlorate composite. It basically takes the both of these together, mixes them into a composite that's got like an eraser-like, consistency, right? Because butadiene is part of styrene butadiene, which is a rubber, so, yeah. It's got a core stage of 4 RS-25 engines, and they each produce 2.2 meganewtons of thrust. These are hydrolox engines, and they run a fuel-rich staged combustion cycle. The second stage is an RL-108 hydrolox engine, produces 110.1 kilonewtons of thrust, and it runs the expander cycle, which is the cycle that I drew over here. And I'll clear up some reasons why a lot of missions aren't in this video. Expander cycle is this cycle where you have combustion chamber, and the heat from the combustion chamber heats up the propellant. They use that to run the turbine. So, now I'm going to talk about why each rocket deserves to be here and why I haven't included some of the rockets. New Shepard 2, I'd say, deserves to be here because Blue Origin, as a company itself, is actually starting to grow very big. New Glenn is coming out, and I think this is one of the more impressive feats as well. These are both very impressive, and they were achieved at very similar times. They're both very big firsts and are considered the golden standard, or not the golden standard, but I guess it's like the perfect rocket, right? It's a reusable, propulsively landed rocket, which is, you know, very new idea. Was theorized that we could maybe do it in the space race, but this is the first. These are the first examples of it ever being done. The electron slash photon. I chose it because it is one of my favorite rockets, and also it is a very good example of how new technologies and other fields allow how do I put it? It's a shining example of how technological advancements in other fields have unforeseen impacts on different fields. So in the electric field, they are working in the electronics field. They're working on new batteries. They get these new batteries, and suddenly we are able to do rockets like this. And I'll talk about actually how the Electron did its mission, because it's only 18 meters tall, yet it's able to put something in orbit of the moon. The James Webb Space Telescope is pretty obvious why it's up here. It's basically the most powerful space telescope we have, and if you've seen some of the images from the James Webb Space Telescope, you'll understand why everyone's so excited about it. The Ariane 5, I thought was especially good to put up here because I have the Ariane 1 on the other side of the board, and I think seeing the evolution of a singular rocket as it goes through its program is quite fascinating. Artemis is also, again, very obvious why it's up here. It's our new age moon program, and I think it's also it's a good example of how technology can be reused, right? The RS-25s are the same engines that the space shuttle used, yet here we are, we can reuse them like a long time down the road, and we're able to just reuse them and use it for a moon mission, right? I think the SLS is a good example of how old tech doesn't need to be completely just thrown out. We can always just recycle old tech, reuse it, and yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with that, honestly. So, sorry. This is the Ariane 1 I was talking about. You can see how it evolves, right? I mean, this one doesn't even have boosters, and now the Ariane 5 does. Yeah, so to clear up some things about why certain rockets aren't on here that you think that would be, probably the most anticipated one, the one that I'm most anticipating to be asked why it's not on here is Starship, or the BFR if you want, same thing. The reason I haven't taken it is because it has not made an orbital flight yet, or it has not been on a mission yet. It's been tested, but it has not been on a mission yet, and when it is on a mission, I will do it. Or, what I also might do is I might make a part 3 of this, like I had planned to earlier, but I will make part 3 kind of proposed ideas back in the space race, and also combine it with new age proposed ideas. One side of the board being space race proposed ideas, and the other side of the board being new age proposed ideas, just to compare the two. I think that might be fun as well. Yeah, I mean, I'll take suggestions if you want to have any particular new age idea shown on the board, or if you have an idea for what could be on the space race, side of proposed ideas. There's a lot of very interesting space race ideas. This includes like using the Saturn V as a space shuttle launcher, or using nuclear bombs to repel a spacecraft, which is completely outlandish, but it's what we love. And yeah, I think that's pretty much where this video wraps off. So I will see you guys in another video. Later.